Hello and welcome to Boring Bureaucracy for Sleep, the podcast where we gently lull you into a state of existential resignation with the soothing details of the world's most tedious moments. I'm your host, and I'll be your guide through the unremarkable, the unmemorable, and the utterly mundane events. Tonight, we're going to take a gentle, meandering stroll through a day in the life of a Soviet central planning bureaucrat in 1982. Yes, you heard that right. Not a cosmonaut, not a spy, not even a factory worker. No, you are a mid-level functionary in the labyrinthine halls of Gosplan, the State Planning Committee. Your job is to ensure that the Soviet Union produces exactly as many nails, shoes, and tractor parts as the 5-year plan demands. Not one more, not one less. And if you're lucky, you might even get to stamp something. So, settle in, close your eyes, and prepare to experience the slow, grinding monotony of a day spent chasing quotas, counting pencils, and wondering if the radiator is plotting against you. You've just woken up in your Moscow apartment. The year is 1982. Leonid Brezhnev is still alive technically. The air in your bedroom is cold enough to make you question whether you're actually awake or just dreaming of Siberia. Your mattress is thin, lumpy, and smells faintly of regret wrapped in cabbage leaves. The blanket, if you can call it that, is a scratchy rectangle of wool that seems to repel warmth with the same enthusiasm that your neighbors repel optimism. You lie there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, which is painted a shade of gray that can only be described as institutional despair. The paint is peeling in the corners, curling up like the toes of a witch's shoes. You wonder, not for the first time, if the building was designed by someone who hated people. The radiator, a hulking metal beast in the corner, emits a series of clanks and groans, as if it resents you personally. It's supposed to provide heat, but mostly it just provides noise and a faint smell of rust. You swing your legs out of bed and immediately regret it. The floor is cold, hard, and slightly sticky in places you'd rather not think about. You shuffle to the kitchen, which is really just a corner of the main room with a hot plate and a sink that drips in a slow, passive-aggressive rhythm. You open the bread box and are greeted by a loaf of bread that could double as a doorstop. You cut a slice, or rather, you attempt to. The knife bounces off the crust, and you briefly consider using a hammer, but you remember that hammers are for people who work in factories, not for people who count things for a living. You pour yourself a cup of tea. The water is lukewarm, the tea is weak, and the taste is best described as liquid disappointment. You take a sip and immediately wish you hadn't. You chew your bread, which tastes like it was baked during the Khrushchev era, and stare out the window at the gray, featureless sky. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. Or maybe it's a person. It's hard to tell. You get dressed in your standard issue bureaucrat uniform, a shapeless gray suit, a shirt that was once white but now hovers somewhere between beige and defeat, and a tie that feels like a noose made of polyester. You check your watch. It's not working, but you check it anyway. It's a ritual, like everything else in your life. You gather your things. A battered briefcase, a stack of forms, and a pen that only works if you shake it violently every few minutes. You glance at the radiator one last time. It hisses at you. You hiss back. This is your morning routine. You step into the hallway, which smells like boiled cabbage and old socks. The walls are painted the same shade of gray as your ceiling, and the light bulb overhead flickers in a way that suggests it's considering retirement. You nod to your neighbor, who is already dressed and waiting for the elevator. He doesn't nod back. He never does. The elevator is, as always, out of order. You sigh and begin your descent down the icy concrete stairs. Each step is a small act of rebellion against your knees, which protest loudly. The banister is sticky, and you make a mental note to never touch it again, even though you know you will. The stairwell echoes with the sounds of distant arguments, slamming doors, and the occasional burst of laughter that sounds more like a cry for help. You reach the ground floor and step outside. The air is sharp, cold, and carries the unmistakable scent of exhaust fumes and wet wool. The sidewalk is a patchwork of ice, slush, and mysterious stains. You navigate it with the cautious grace of someone who has fallen before and learned nothing from the experience. You make your way to the tram stop, joining a small crowd of equally miserable commuters. No one speaks. No one makes eye contact. You all stand there, huddled together for warmth, united by a shared sense of resignation. The tram arrives with a screech of metal on metal, and you squeeze inside, pressed up against strangers who smell like boiled cabbage, cheap cologne, and the faintest hint of despair. The tram lurches forward, and you grab onto a metal pole that is somehow both sticky and cold. The windows are fogged up, obscuring the view of the city, which is probably for the best. You listen to the rhythmic clatter of the wheels, punctuated by the occasional cough, sneeze, or sigh. Someone is reading Pravda, but you can't see the headlines. It doesn't matter. The news is always the same. You try to find a comfortable position, but it's impossible. Your briefcase digs into your side, your feet are numb, and the person next to you is humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like the funeral march. You close your eyes and imagine you're somewhere else, anywhere else. But when you open them, you're still on the tram, still surrounded by the same tired faces, still heading toward another day of bureaucratic bliss. The tram stops abruptly, and you stumble out into the street. The office building looms ahead, a concrete monolith that looks like it was designed to crush spirits as efficiently as it crushes dreams. You trudge up the steps, your shoes squeaking in protest. The lobby is dimly lit, the walls adorned with faded posters, extolling the virtues of hard work and collective effort. You try not to laugh. You make your way to the elevator, which miraculously is working today. You step inside, joined by a handful of colleagues who look as if they've just returned from the front lines of a particularly grueling paperclip war. No one speaks. The elevator hums, groans, and finally deposits you on the 5th floor. You walk down the hallway, past rows of identical doors, each one labeled with a number and a name that means nothing to you. You reach your office, open the door, and are greeted by the familiar sight of flickering fluorescent lights, peeling wallpaper, and a desk that seems to have accumulated more stains since yesterday. Your chair sags in the middle, as if it's given up hope. You sit down and take stock of your surroundings. Your desk is a masterpiece of Soviet engineering, sturdy, functional, and completely devoid of charm. The surface is covered in stacks of paper, most of which are forms that need to be stamped, signed, or filed. There's a cup of pens, only 2 of which work, and a drawer that never quite closes. You give it a shove. It resists. You give up. Your colleagues drift in, one by one, each carrying their own burden of paperwork and existential dread. There's Ivan, who hasn't smiled since 1978. Olga, who types with the speed and accuracy of a malfunctioning typewriter. And Sergei, who spends most of his day staring out the window, lost in thought. You nod to each other, a silent acknowledgement of shared suffering. The office is quiet, save for the hum of the lights and the occasional cough. Someone sneezes. No one says, "Bless you." You glance at the clock on the wall. It's running, but the hands seem to move backward. You wonder if time works differently here. You open your briefcase and pull out the day's reports. Today, you're responsible for reviewing the nail production quotas. You sigh. Nails. Again. You flip through the pages, each one filled with numbers, graphs, and tables that make no sense. According to the report, the factory in Magnitogorsk produced 1 million nails last month, but only half of them were the right size. The rest were either too long, too short, or bent at a 45-degree angle. You make a note. Investigate nail curvature. You know you won't. You stamp the report, sign it, and add it to the growing pile on your desk. You reach for the next one. This one is about shoe production. The numbers are even more confusing. Apparently, the factory met its quota by producing only left shoes. You make another note. Request right shoes. You know you won't. You glance at the phone on your desk. It hasn't rung in weeks. You pick up the receiver just to make sure it still works. It doesn't. You put it back down. You spend the next hour stamping, signing, and filing reports. Each one is more absurd than the last. There's a report on tractor parts that lists miscellaneous as the largest category. There's a memo about a shortage of paper printed on 3 pages. There's a directive from the Ministry of something important, written in language so dense you suspect it was designed to be unreadable. You look around the office. Ivan is asleep at his desk, his head resting on a stack of forms. Olga is typing, but the ribbon is out of ink, so her work is invisible. Sergei is still staring out the window. You wonder what he sees. The clock ticks slowly. You check your watch again. Still not working. You sigh and return to your paperwork. You stamp, sign, and file. Stamp, sign, file. It's a rhythm, a dance, a slow march toward oblivion. Eventually, it's time for lunch. You gather your things and join the silent procession to the cafeteria. The hallway smells like boiled potatoes and disappointment. The cafeteria itself is a masterpiece of Soviet minimalism. Long tables, hard benches, and a menu that never changes. You take your place in line, tray in hand. The food is, as always, a study in beige. There's a bowl of soup that tastes like hot water with a hint of cabbage, a slice of bread that could stop a bullet, and a piece of meat that defies identification. You take a bite. It's chewy, flavorless, and vaguely unsettling. You sit with your colleagues, each of you lost in your own thoughts. No one speaks. The only sound is the clatter of spoons and the occasional cough. Someone sneezes. Still. No one says, "Bless you." You look around the room. The walls are adorned with faded posters of smiling workers and bountiful harvests. You wonder if anyone has ever smiled in this room. You doubt it. You finish your meal and return your tray. The woman behind the counter gives you a look that says, "Don't ask for seconds. You wouldn't dream of it." You return to your office, stomach full but spirit empty. The afternoon stretches out before you, an endless expanse of paperwork and pointlessness. You sit down at your desk and resume your work. This time, you're tasked with reviewing the pencil inventory. According to the report, there are 237 pencils in the office. You count them. There are 236. You make a note. Missing pencil. You know you won't find it. You open the drawer that never closes. Inside, you find a collection of rubber bands, paper clips, and a mysterious object that might be a piece of candy or a fossilized beetle. You close the drawer. It pops open again. You leave it. You spend the next hour shuffling papers from one pile to another. You stamp, sign, and file. Stamp, sign, file. Occasionally, you pause to stare at the wall, which is covered in a pattern of cracks that resembles a map of a country that doesn't exist. You glance at the clock. Time moves slowly here, like molasses in January. You wonder if anyone would notice if you just left. You know they would. You try to focus on your work, but your mind drifts. You think about the factory workers, the farmers, the people who actually make things. You wonder if their lives are any better. You doubt it. You look at your hands. They're stained with ink and paper cuts. You flex your fingers, trying to remember what it feels like to create something. You can't. You return to your paperwork. Stamp, sign, file. Stamp, sign, file. The rhythm is hypnotic, almost soothing. You lose track of time. Eventually, the day comes to an end. You gather your things, shove the drawer one last time, and make your way to the elevator. It's out of order again. Of course it is. You descend the stairs, your knees protesting with every step. You step out into the cold, gray evening. The air is sharp, the sky is dark, and the city is as unwelcoming as ever. You make your way to the tram stop, joining the same crowd of tired commuters. The tram arrives, and you squeeze inside, pressed up against strangers who smell like boiled cabbage and resignation. You ride in silence, staring out the fogged-up window. The city passes by in a blur of gray and brown. You close your eyes and imagine you're somewhere else, anywhere else. You arrive home, climb the stairs, and unlock your door. The apartment is cold. The radiator is still hissing, and the bread is still stale. You sit down at the table, pour yourself a cup of tea, and stare at the wall. You think about the day, the paperwork, the quotas, the endless cycle of stamp, sign, file. You wonder if tomorrow will be any different. You know it won't. You get ready for bed, pulling the scratchy blanket up to your chin. The mattress is as uncomfortable as ever, the air is as cold as ever, and the radiator is as resentful as ever. You close your eyes and listen to the sounds of the building, the distant arguments, the slamming doors, the occasional burst of laughter that sounds more like a cry for help. You drift off to sleep, dreaming of a world where the bread is fresh, the tea is hot, and the drawer finally closes. But for now, this is your life. Sorry, the drawer doesn't shut. It never does. You stop trying. Tomorrow you'll do this again. Good night. Good.